Hi all, and welcome to this first episode of Vladja's chess adventures. I want to take a look at a game that I played yesterday evening on my club in Baarn against Vlug. I was playing white and I moved d4. My opponent thought for a long time and played d5. Knight f3 followed, and again he thought for a long time and played e6. Maybe he was afraid of my systems with the bishop coming out to g5, which I've been playing a lot over the past few years. But yesterday I decided to just try and play normal chess with c4 and strive for an opening advantage. Now the opening turns into a regular Queen's Gambit orthodox. Bishop g5, castles, e3, and with b6 black prepares some kind of Tartakov or Makogonov setup. Normally he wants to develop his bishop here on b7 so that it can exert pressure over the long diagonal once these pawns have exchanged, for instance. Okay, now I remembered that I had played this position before, only, let's say, about 5 rounds prior to the round that I played yesterday. And during that game I was playing against Simon, and I remembered that I played the modest bishop e2, but in the end it turned out well for me. The main theoretical recommendation here is c takes d5, knight takes d5, exchanging on e7, exchanging here on d5, and then rook c1. And if I'm not mistaken, but I could be, this is the famous game between Fischer and Spassky from their World Championship match in 1972, which Fischer managed to win in a very nice way. Okay, I didn't play like that. As mentioned, I played bishop e2 here in this position. And now Arthur played a very interesting move. He didn't play bishop b7, but bishop a6. And he puts pressure on my pawn here on c4. But I'm not sure if it's strategically a very sound idea. I wouldn't say it's wrong, but when you move this pawn here to b6, it means that you create some white square weaknesses here. And the only piece that can defend these white squares is of course the bishop. So yes, it makes more sense maybe to put this bishop here on b7 and not have it exchanged with this one here on e2, which is about to happen of course if you put the bishop on a6. Because then white manages to exchange these white square bishops, and then he has a better chance of accessing these, you know, weak white squares in a few moves. So, now I thought for quite some time, and I suppose there are 3 options basically here. First I looked at this move. Bishop takes f6, bishop f6, and then of course I would try and put pressure on d5 here. The in-between bishop e2 follows, queen takes e2, and now e takes d5, and now I looked at a move like queen b5, trying to add some more pressure here on d5. So this would have been a very direct try for the initiative. But after a move like c6, I didn't see any real advantage, and maybe in the end after, let's say, queen a4, in the near future black will be able to play c6, c5, and then pressure my center with his black squared bishop. And also I still need to castle. Maybe white has a very slight edge, but I'm not sure if it is something. So since I wasn't really sure, I didn't play this move after bishop a6. So let's return to the position after bishop a6. I could have also tried c takes d5, then again an exchange on e2, knight takes d5, an exchange on e7, and now I suppose both knight e7 and queen e7 are possible. Let's say knight e7 for argument's sake, castles, knight d7, rook fd1, knight g6, rook ac1. And I suppose white has a nice edge here. He has a majority in the center, pawn majority, and he also has got some pressure here along these central files both of his knights are more actively placed, and this is, maybe still a weakness, and this queen could go here. Maybe this would have been the best option for me, but the move that I saw first after bishop a6 was in the end the move that I played. I played here queen a4. So this protects the pawn on c4 and also pressures the bishop on a6. And yeah, I was of course anticipating something along the lines of bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, d takes c4, queen c4, when my queen is very nicely posted here on c4. And of course I want to play a move like knight e5 and maybe bring my knight here to c6. And of course always when black wants to try and develop with knight d7, he would of course give up the control of the c6 square. So in that case, maybe my queen could even go there, and I would remain certain pressure on black's position. Certainly this pawn here would be weak in combination with a move like rook c1 for instance, and pressure down the c file, etc, etc, etc. But after queen a4, Arthur made a mistake. He played queen d7. And this came as a surprise to me, because this move does not look like a natural move. But when I started examining the move, I thought, maybe this is quite a nice move. Because now black threatens to take here on a4, of course, and decentralize my knight, which would then be on the edge. And on the other hand, if I were to take myself here on d7, then I would develop the knight on d7, and there would be no more pressure against the bishop here, and my pawn on c4 would be attacked twice. So on the basis of this last very global judgment idea, I didn't take on d7, but I started looking for another move. In fact, taking on d7 would have been the strongest, and it would have been a possibility for white to maintain the initiative. Let's have a look. Queen d7 would have been strong. Knight b takes d7 would then be forced, because this knight of course is pinned because of the bishop attacking the bishop here. And then after c takes d5, because I'm the first to move, my c pawn is in no danger. There would be an exchange here, but my king could recapture, and it's very nice to have this king here in the center for the endgame. Then there would follow e takes d5 forced, but after a move like knight e5, I think white has a very serious advantage. He's really putting pressure on this block of light pieces. Just note that this move now is not possible. We will show that, because I would recapture. And now this knight here on f6 still cannot move, because then the bishop here on e7 would fall. So that's why knight e5 is technically possible. And if it's possible, then of course now I'm immediately threatening to take here, or to put my knight on c6, etc. And then I would pressure the bishop here. So black would have some serious problems in this position. I could have played like this, but I didn't think any further than just, well, if I take on d7, I will automatically develop his knight for him. He will just recapture knight b takes d7, and I've just made 1-2 moves with my queen only to exchange her. It didn't seem to make sense to me. So, but if I would have seen this concrete variation, I suppose I would have played it. Anyway, so what did I play then after queen d7? Well, I thought, since the queen is on d7 and I am also threatening knight e5, why not move my own queen out of the way and put it on b3? Now, this is not a mistake, but I would give it a question mark because of the missed chance we discussed earlier. Okay. Now a healthy move for black would have been to just retreat the bishop here to b7. But instead of doing that after queen b3, he went on playing a wrong plan. Now, of course, this queen looks a little bit vulnerable. Just imagine when there would be a knight here on a5, it would attack both queen and pawn. So that is why Arthur now played knight c6. But again, I would say that this is a mistake, and this time I was more up to the task, and I started calculating here. I took on d5. Now, since I'm attacking both bishop and knight, and it is not possible to take the bishop here on e2, because then I would in between take the knight here and then recapture on e2, winning a piece, it means that the next move, knight a5, is forced. So finally the knight has emerged, it has arrived on a5, but I have a very nice tactical shot now. I can in between play d takes e6, because he's not only attacking my queen, I'm also attacking his queen. Now, the lesser of the evils in this case would be f takes e6, after which there would follow queen c2, bishop e2, and now, for instance, another in-between move, knight e5, queen e8, and after queen takes e2, white is a very solid and healthy pawn up. Black has numerous weaknesses on the white squares. His pieces are worse placed than white's, so white would have very serious winning chances in this position. But after knight a5 and the in-between d takes e6, he played another mistake. He took on b3. And I calculated, of course, with line. Now first I must recapture his queen. And again, the lesser evil in this position would be bishop takes e2. Now I would be forced to take not the bishop but the knight, because the knight is attacking my rook, so let's have a look at that. A takes b. And now he could double my pawns here on f3. And in this position white maintains an advantage because he's 2 pawns up. His knight has got nice opportunities to go here or here, maybe when this guy here is exchanged. He's also threatening things like rook a6 and just moving up the king and then bringing the other guy to the a file when this pawn here would be a goner. So also very significant advantage in this line for white. But he didn't take on e2 in this line, no. He took on a1. And I think this was worse than bishop takes e2, because this knight here on a1 is not going to fulfill any significant role in the rest of the game. And on top of that, I now, of course, take this bishop on a6. And I'm in control of these white squares. So the material balance now is bishop of the white squares and 2 pawns against rook. Furthermore, black now has to be careful, because if I can play king d2, then his knight here would be lost, because it has no more escape squares. So black's next move is forced, knight c2 check. And now I had a choice, of course. I could go to d2 or to e2. But if I go to d2, then I attack the knight and it would go to b4 anyway. And then my king would be not so well placed here on d2, because it would be subject to a possible check or a possible discovery here with the knight going to e4. So in this position, after knight c2 check, I decided to play king e2. And when Arthur returned to his board, he had been away for a walk or a drink or something, he said, interesting. So apparently he had expected king d2, but it's not necessary, and I suppose that king e2 is a little bit stronger than that. Now Arthur played rook a d8, he just wants to take my pawn here on d7, and I realized that now, of course, I have a very strong possibility with a2, a3, simply locking in this knight here on c2. But I didn't play it, because I was somehow afraid, as I'm afraid of ghosts more usually in my chess life, that he would just, win these 2 pawns here and just taking on a3 and also recapturing with the bishop. But I don't think it would have helped him, because I would activate my rook here on h1 and this knight here would still remain in a terrible pin. But on the other hand, I also didn't want to lose my beautiful pawn here on d7. So I didn't play a3, but first started looking for moves that protect my pawn on d7. And the first move I looked at was knight e5. And it would have been a good try, even though objectively not the strongest move, which probably a3 would have been. And then after h6, bishop f6, knight c6, rook takes d7, knight b5, I would have had a very strong position. But, you know, it's just a little bit of a pity to see this pawn on d7 go. So instead of knight e5 or a3, in the end I played bishop c8. And this was not really what I envisaged for my beautiful white square bishop, because I rather moved it here to c4, you know, where it would protect this pawn, but also, of course, attack this pawn. And then, in coordination with this knight, I would exert really very serious pressure on black's position. But in the end, I thought, well, you know, this block of pawn and bishop is going to cost him the exchange at least in the sooner or midterm future. And it protects the pawn, and I have several opportunities to strengthen my position. You know, I can bring my rook here, I can move my pawns forward, I can play well-timed knight b5s or knight e5s, etc, etc. So yeah, it's getting a whole melee of green arrows now, but I suppose you still understand what I mean. So I played bishop c8. But now Arthur thought, okay, well, if you're not going to lock in my knight, I will now jump to freedom. And now I started moving with my pawns, you know, because I wanted to start and take away these squares from the knights. So I played here e4, which is a good move. And now basically black had two moves. He could either try c5 or h6. He played h6. Maybe c5 was a little bit tougher. Let's have a look at that. Because I would take then. And then after bishop c5 to try and keep the pawns intact. Yeah, I think I would play a3 here at this stage. And then after a move like knight c6, rook d1, white still remains firmly on top and must have a winning position here. Anyway, after e4 he didn't play that, he played h6. And now I had a forcing winning line at my disposal. Of course I took now on f6, he recaptured, and now I attacked the bishop. Now the bishop went away to g5, and this is where I started playing a little bit sloppy. I'm still playing winning moves, but they were certainly not the best. The best move, which I wanted to play at first, but somehow I was afraid of some kind of move order trick or so. Anyway, the best move would have been h4, to attack the bishop, so it would have to return to e7, and now I had pinned my hopes on d5, but there would have been a better move here. a3 I could have played, and then after knight c6, knight d5, attacking this bishop and this pawn here. And I think I had missed this idea of bringing my knight to d5. Instead, after a move like e7, I would have wanted to play d5, you know, so as to take this square away from the knight and then try to win the knight with a3. Of course, that would also be good. But probably this line, you know, with the knight ending up on d8 would be even stronger. For instance, rook takes c8, pawn takes c8 queens, rook takes c8, and now rook c1, exerting tremendous pressure now over the c file. Counter-attacking now with rook d8, but exchanging knights leaves black with a completely hopeless position, because I win this pawn and attack bishop and pawn. After king f8, rook a7 is 3 pawns up, and the game is over. Anyway, so that's how I could have won after bishop g5. But I thought, I will just keep this move h4 in reserve, you know, and he cannot make any space for his bishop with h6 because I'm attacking the bishop, so I would simply take it. And I first played here d5, taking away this square from the knight on b4. And now he played c6, contesting these white squares in the center here. And now I had anticipated, of course, d6, and now I take away this square from the bishop. So now I'm really threatening h4 to win this bishop. But what I had overlooked is the fact that now he creates an escape square for his bishop on d8. And he now returns the favor by sacrificing his exchange on c8. Of course, now I take and queen. He has to take my queen. And now after h4 he could go to d8. Instead of being 3 pawns up or a piece up, I'm only one single pawn up in this line. So I was not really kicking myself, you know, because I felt that I still was winning because of the fact that I have this very strong passed d pawn on d6, and that my pieces are much more active, and that his pieces are, you know, not cooperating well and are weak over the c-file. So I pulled myself together and I played rook c1. And now, to my surprise, Arthur knocked over his king. Not by accident, no, deliberately so, indicating that he was resigning the game. And, well, I agree with his judgment that it is a lost position. But especially after this small intermezzo, where I didn't play the most precise moves, I suppose it would have been well worth to play on another, let's say, 5 moves or so. Because time trouble was approaching, and I was up in time, you know, by 2 or 3 minutes, and maybe Arthur felt disgusted with his play or his position all along, and felt that it was enough. And of course he saw the white attack coming. For instance, if he plays c5 here, I would continue with a3, and if then knight c6, I could try moves like knight d5, you know, followed by b4 when his pieces would be in a pin here on the c-file, or maybe I could try something else. Anyway, this position is winning for white, so objectively nothing wrong with that. But maybe to play on a few more moves would have been good. Anyway, apart from my inaccuracies at the end of the game, which was surprisingly quickly won for me anyway, I felt quite happy with this game, because the only other error I made really was not to take his queen on d7, but retreat my queen to b3. But from that moment on I played quite, what's the word? What's the word? Oh geez, my English, please forgive me. I played imaginative chess. I suppose that's a nice word, you know, just by taking on d5 and then on e6 and sacrificing my exchange on a1, realizing that I would have enough compensation and get some kind of stronghold over black's position. Okay, so that ends this discussion of one of Vladja's last games. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, until next time, bye.